KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, Admiral Akbar Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
It's a twap. Does he have a lisp? Wait, am I making that up?
I don't know. I always see it here in my head like, it's a trap. But I don't think he says it like that either.
I don't think he has like a Cindy Brady lisp. I think I was doing him dirty there. I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
We always reference the 90s Gary Cole Brady Bunch movies, of course, because we love them so much. And
we got to do that.
Cindy in those is so good because the neighbor is just always making fun of him or making fun of her. And he's like, what are you, the Swiss Miss girl?
Wait, is the neighbor played by Michael McKean?
Yes.
Yeah. We got to do those, dude.
He's awesome.
We got to do those.
Then his wife's like an alcoholic and he hates him and she hates him. So if people haven't seen the Very Brady movie and the Very Brady sequel, you've got to see those movies.
Pieces of genius.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, for everyone that doesn't know, I think most people do. This is our nostalgia and retro podcast you and I do each and every week. This is, we don't like to usually put episode numbers on them because they can really be listened to in almost any order, but this is episode 164. And when I was in the shower, I was thinking, because I was working out, and then I got in the shower right before we started, and I was thinking, like, we have never missed an episode of the show, even if you have to go without me or I have to go without you in these rare instances, as I did last week with Matt when we did an episode of PSP. And I was just thinking, I wish I could remember who said it, because last week I retweeted something where someone was saying success is repeating small tasks well over and over again. And I was like, maybe that's true.
I hear that.
You know?
I could adhere to that.
Because it's very easy for us to be like, I don't want to do an episode. Right. You know,
it's work. It's fun. But it's work. And you know why it's work? Because you want to do, you're the same way as me. We want to do a good job.
Yeah.
We want to make it really entertaining. We want to be on point. We want to, no dead air, all those things. It's like, we're the new radio people.
Yeah, sure.
The new gen of radio people. So
sure.
I hear that. I could totally understand.
So I wanted to ask how you're doing. I mean, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your world?
I'm going to tell you what I've been thinking about this week.
Please.
And I don't think this is fun because I don't think I've ever talked about this with you. One of my worst fears in life. And then I was thinking I kind of got to explain the origins of this a little bit. So back in college, I put myself through school by working mostly retail. So I worked at a couple of different retail gigs and then I managed a skate shop. But I was always in retail. And, you guys, a lot of people out there that would know that listen, retail's a good way to make a living. It's relatively easy. You have to it's customer based. So, the whole customer facing thing may not be for you and it doesn't pay well, but it's certainly an option, right? Especially college age, need money to live for rent, food, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did most of the time. And then probably 3/4 of my way through college, I had a friend who I worked with at Urban Outfitters, and he was a housewares dude. He worked down the lower floor and I worked up in the men's department. So I didn't see him that much. One day he came into the break room while I was eating lunch and he was like, dude, I've been working this gig at this restaurant, this really nice restaurant on Locust Street in Philly called the Magnolia Cafe. And he's like, dude, I'm clocking, like I'm just bussing tables. And like on a good night, I'm going home with like $350 in my pocket. And I'm like, what the, that's what I made last week. You know what I mean? Right. So I was like, holy shit, really? He's like, dude, you know what? Like the manager, Tim over there is super cool. If you want me to hook you up, like just go in, have an interview, and you could either choose to wait tables or, you could bar back or bus or whatever you want to do. So I said, cool. So I went in, I met with Tim, I got the gig, and he gave me a wait staff position, which I didn't really prefer because I'm not really a great multitasker. So I would find myself in the weeds, like 3 tables, I was in the weeds. And it was a fairly nice restaurant. The customers had high expectations. I was friendly, I was polite, but I don't know that I was that efficient. And actually, the girl who trained me at the end of my first day told me you'll never make it as a waiter. She was a mean son of a bitch, that one. I'll never forget her, Lori. She was like, you're never going to make this. And I really didn't. So I kind of converted to bussing tables, and I did really well. Like on a good weekend night, you could walk out of there with $350. And it was a nice way to make a living. But here's what I noticed One thing that horrified me in the restaurants, which I had never, you have to be behind the scenes to realize this. And a lot of people that work as a bartender or a waiter will realize this. Glasses would often break in the ice bucket, in the ice container. And that's because a lot of the times the waiters and the waitresses would just dip the glass in for a soda and get the ice out without using the scooper, which was kind of a no-no, but when you're in a rush, that's what you did. And the glasses would break in the ice. And I would be horrified by the idea of somebody drinking glass in their drink. And this happened on like a weekly basis. This was a regular thing. Really busy waitresses and waiters running around trying to give good service. And I definitely knew some people that I could see leaving the glass in there and not saying anything until they had their tables taken care of and stuff. So that idea of that always horrified me. And then it started to affect my real life of like that becoming like one of my worst horrors. It was like drinking a glass with ice and glass particles in it, you know? So even look, got a little Tupperware glass today. No glass.
Yeah, you can't. It's like that's a glass like out of Uncle Owen and Aunt Marie's Wisher farm.
But why do we as humans now I understand the nature of a cold beverage in glass. It's nice. Keeps the drink cold, but why not use like we use pottery for coffee and stuff? Why do we drink out of glass? It's dangerous. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just been on my mind this week. I thought about it this week, and then as the week went on, I was just feeling more and more anxious about it.
Well, it's interesting. I'm sorry that you've been struggling with that.
What about you?
I would say that I'm thinking of different things, but no, nothing really happening in my life. I mean, I bought some weights, and I basically have converted one of my spare rooms into what is basically becoming a gym at this point. And
Super. I'm like jealous.
And
straight up.
And I'm like 160 now, and like getting fairly svelte. You know?
What are you trying to do? Are you trying to bulk up, or are you trying to lose weight?
Well, I want to do both. I mean, I want to lose my fat. Like what I tell Mike is I want to redistribute my weight.
Okay.
You know, like I'm 160. It's probably even a little light for my size. Like
yeah,
I
you're
would
tall.
rather. Yeah, I'm 6 feet tall. So, and so I want to, so I bought weights because I'm like, I've never worked out like my upper body. Even when I was in hockey and all that stuff, like I would always just do treadmills and skate and stuff like that. I had no interest in lifting weights and stuff. And so now I'm 36 and I have like, you know, a bird chest and girl arms, and I want to do something about it.
I hear you on that one.
But dude, so I bought two pretty nice, like 25-pound dumbbells that, you know, you can like take the weights off and kind of reconfigure them or whatever. And I can barely curl like 15 pounds. Like, you know, I can do it like a few times, but then I'm like, oh my God,
15 is heavy.
I'm like, this is nothing. This is nothing. You know, and I was telling Micah this. So our pool is finally like getting built soon, like very soon. They're gonna probably dig it this week, and so they started dropping like a bunch of shit off to my house. And one thing they started dropping off and put it in my garage was just massive pallets of concrete.
Oh wow!
And I was looking at them because they took like one bag at a time, put them all in or whatever. And I went in there to clean up, and I looked around, and I'm like, these bags are 90 pounds each, and
Holy
these dudes were just lifting them and putting them, and I'm like, dude, I could probably lift it off the ground.
That's heavy,
and I could probably like do one of those like quick things when you're about to drop it. You know, you hope you get there in time.
90 pounds. That's unreasonable. That's an unreasonable amount of weight. Like I remember working in produce, you had the 50-pound bags of potatoes, like 10-pound bags of potatoes. And those were heavy. 90 pounds, that's twice as much weight.
Yeah, I had no idea you can even, it's like, what is this, lead? So, because it's so, but yeah, so I've just been, you know, trying to work out. And yeah, my goal is to just, I have a really bad diet. And everyone knows that. So I have to make a concession somewhere. I have to pick and choose like my vices. I've stopped drinking for the most part. And I'm not against drinking, but I've had like 2 beers this entire year probably.
Okay.
And I've done that because like, I'm like, I don't need the extra weight. And I've chosen my vice with marijuana. I don't need another vice. And
I like that.
And then with food, I'm like, all right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm going to do it once a day. I'm going to eat everything within an hour. Like everyone knows I do. I eat like usually at 8 or so.
Yeah.
And just gorge myself. And then I'm like, in order to do this, I need to work out every day. And I've actually been doing that and working out and then losing weight.
You look good. You do look really good. You look handsome.
Thank you.
You're a handsome gentleman.
I'm trying to stay I'm trying to be active. You know, I go walk the dog 3 times a day.
Yeah.
It's beautiful out. It was like 85 degrees yesterday. So
man, that's even nicer than here. You got a big difference actually in temperature. Where do you stand on both? You know what I've been noticing lately? Like, it would be nice to bulk up the upper arm a little bit. Get a little bit of the muscle, not too much. Where do you stand on that? Because you look good. I could see the weight loss.
Oh, thank you.
You got to be careful with that though, because you are tall, so you don't want to lose too much weight.
No, I don't want to be like dad or anything and like turn into a glass of water. But
what about the beach physique?
Yeah, dad's buff, so I mean, it would be nice to have his body, but I don't know that I want to. I'm afraid of bulking up too much, like even doing like protein and stuff like that, because I'm like, well, this now exists on your body, and now you have to maintain it, or it's going to turn into fat. So I don't want to get like too out of control. I just want to be more defined. You know, I don't need to be like a muscle man or something. Right. I just want to be like, more defined. And so we'll see what happens, but it's a very slow process. But I do I do 30 minutes on the elliptical every day. I almost never miss a day. And I'm burning I actually broke a calorie record 2 days ago on it. I burned like 480 calories in 30 minutes.
Yeah, because it tracks that. That's right. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So Kyle, I have this barometer. I've never admitted this to anybody before. This might be one of those weird things, but when it comes to your physique, like let's just say the beach, like having a shirt off, you know what I always think of? This is so weird. I always think of, let's say, like a war movie, like a Vietnam movie or a more modern, movie set in Iraq with younger kids in their teens and early 20s, shirtless. How would I look to those guys? Like, I don't want to be the most buff one, but if I had my shirt off in the desert in Afghanistan or something, how would I look with my other team of Marines? Would I look, you know what I mean? Like that. And I would look I would look ridiculous. I would look like the guy on the computer somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you wouldn't be anywhere. You wouldn't be in Iraq.
Yeah. Oh God.
You'd be somewhere in the United States flying a drone or something.
But you know what I mean? That's always my thought.
No, totally. I think about that too, because I'm 36 now. I think you age out of even selective service at 35. And I was thinking about that too. I'm like, if we got invaded by China and they drafted all of us like 50 or younger or whatever, I'd be like, well, what do you want me to do? I'm happy to get out there and kill me a few communists if that's what you want, but I don't know if that's going to be the best use of my time, or yours. And I'm also probably going to get killed pretty quickly.
I'll cook. So I could cook.
Yeah.
Put me in the kitchen.
That's what Grandpa did in World War II.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Our mom's father was a cook on ships in the Pacific.
He's just a cook. He's just a chef.
All right, Dag. Well, let's. I want to catch everyone up on what we're doing here, because this is kind of a special trio of episodes we're doing. This is the second of 3. So over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, where our show is supported along with our PlayStation podcast, Sacred Symbols, and our Xbox podcast, Defining Duke. More than 10,000 of you over there supporting us, and we really appreciate it. Every month, you can submit topic ideas for our show, KnockBack, Retro and Nostalgia Show, and then people vote on them, and one wins every month. An idea that won several months ago was for Dagan and I to rewrite episodes 7, 8, and 9, and we thought we would do that over 3 episodes instead of 1 episode. So we already did one of the episodes, which was a few weeks ago, so you can check that out. That's episode 7. This will be episode 8, and then episode 9 will be a future episode in the coming weeks. So I would listen to them in order, but here's what I'm thinking, Dagan. So we got this feedback, which I think is good feedback, that we jumped around too much.
Okay.
And it was hard for people to... We usually don't get feedback about procedural things. So when we do, I listen to them, because I'm like, all right, well, usually people have comments about things we say or opinions, but very rarely procedural stuff. So I always pay attention to that. And I'm like, all right, this is a common issue. Like, people thought like we should have just told one story and then the other.
Okay.
So I'd like to try to do that today.
That's good.
That will require a lot of pontificating from one person and then the other, but that's totally fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
So what I figured, Dig, is that I'll just let you go first.
Okay.
And here's what I want to do, if we can do it, is just, you don't have to write it out unless you did, but just a brief synopsis of your episode 7.
Okay.
And then your crawl for episode 8. And then just tell us the story of your movie. And, and it's that simple. Take as much or as little time as you want. I'll interject if I have any questions. I have my pen here. I'm going to be taking some notes.
All right, cool.
And then I'll do the same. And then I'll give you my story and my recollection of episode 7 and the crawl for episode 8 and my episode 8. So I think that'll allow people to just more cogently navigate.
That sounds great. Yeah, that sounds awesome. It's a good plan. Look at you incorporating feedback into the show in a real dynamic way.
It's
Proud of
important
you for that, man. Proud
Thank
of you
you
for that.
I mean, the audience is almost always wrong, but sometimes they're right.
Yeah, no, that's true. Give them their 1%.
It's like when I started putting Dustin on sacred symbols, and a lot of people were like, "No, we want it to just be in Chris." And I'm like, "I'm just going to ignore you because you're wrong."
They come around,
and now everyone loves Dustin on sacred symbols.
See what happens?
Yeah,
they come
Listen
around.
to me. Haven't I told you
almost
guys
always
over and over again? You can trust me.
There you go. That's
You
it.
can trust me.
And that's it. All right. So
Dave,
where do I
so
start?
take it away.
All right.
Yeah.
So let me start by saying one thing that I thought was interesting talking about audience feedback was we got all sorts of thoughtful comments on YouTube and so on and so forth on Podbay and everything. And we got I got some great ideas. You know, I'm not going to incorporate anybody's ideas into mine, but I got some really thoughtful ideas I was actually jealous of that I didn't think of, and even a little bit of praise for us, which I always enjoy doing. You know,
nice.
this is a kind of a self-indulgent exercise, but also I wanted to say, like with the Star Wars shirt and everything, like we're fans. You know, we're fans of Star Wars. I don't want this to come off as negative that we're rewriting it, but I thought it would be fun. You know, again, like we said in the first episode, you know, putting your money where your mouth is, trying to create the thing that you would like to see, and hopefully people go in for that. And then it's also interesting to hear from people that, you know, disagree with your take on what it should have been. But I thought that was cool. But one sentiment that we got kind of overarching from several different people was twofold. And the feedback reminded me, for me, it was like, well, Dagan, your story's kind of cool, but it's pedestrian, but what you're doing with the characters is a lot of fun. And then I kind of thought back, I was like, yeah, you know what? It makes total sense for me because I'm a character designer by trade. And that's what I do for a living. I'm a character designer in animation. And, you know, I'm not drawing this time, I'm writing. But then it's, you know, it does occur to me that that's what I'm concentrating on. I'm kind of putting a lot of my, you know, a lot of weight into the characters, creating things that are fun, thoughtful, outside the box or whatever, and dwelling on really building these characters, which is interesting. And then the other sentiment was I like Colin's story a lot. It's super inventive. And that speaks to me of your sensibilities too, Kyle, the things you're interested in. You're kind of tying in this thing with religion and corporations, which is, you know, two things we haven't seen too much from Star Wars, you know, mainstay Star Wars. So, but things that really actually work really well in this universe. And it's kind of cool that it's unexplored. It feels, even though it hasn't been done, it feels right. It feels exciting. You know, I love what you're injecting into it. So we got those two sentiments, which I thought was really cool, like Colin's story, Dagan's characters. That got me thinking.
No, I saw that too, and I agreed because I always say it's so funny because that is also my sensibility. Like you said, like I care much less often about characters than I do about worlds and stories.
Yeah.
So that you care about, that's why we really should collaborate at some point officially, because it's, you know, I've always said, like, I hated The Walking Dead after a while and just had to stop watching it because I'm like, I don't care about any of these people. What happened? You know, like, it's all I care about.
It's
and
true.
They just won't tell me.
It's a collab, you know, it's a collab, but it's cool to see our strengths coming out, or at least our tendencies.
Definitely.
You know, with creating
I totally
these
agree.
things.
I love that you noticed that as well.
It's really neat. And I love getting the feedback. Now, do you want me, I don't think I have to read, do you want me to read my crawl for episode 7 again? Or is that pretty much unnecessary?
No, I don't think you have to do that.
Okay.
I mean, you could if you want, but I just like give us a quick synopsis of like how we get to episode 8 and then like whatever you want. Then give us the crawl for episode 8 and then the episode 8 itself. But however you want to present it is
okay.
Whatever
All
you
right.
think is
So
germane
episode
is fine.
8, my episode 8 here is interesting. One thrust I wanted to do, because my episode 7 ended on a kind of a down note, kind of a dour note, that I wanted to start episode 8, even things are looking bleak for our heroes, but I wanted to make sure I started episode 8 on sort of an up note with excitement, adventure, all that kind of stuff. So that's one sort of thrust that I was concentrating on. And the other thing is, you know, we have to remember we're exploring now. We have the death of one of our main characters from episode 7, the character of Owen Solo, the murder of Han and Leia's elder child, at the hands of a killer who remains a mystery up to this point at the inception of episode 8. And even though this young pilot's demise kind of remains shrouded in mystery, I did want to make sure I changed up the tone and start off with something that was a little more upbeat. So I'll make sure to go back and explain this deadly encounter and the events behind it. So I wanted to make sure you guys knew that. So as we start, and my crawl, I'm going to read you my crawl because it'll explain a lot.
Okay.
So this is my Star Wars Episode 7 was called Dawn of Ghosts. Star Wars Episode 8 is called The Infinite Shadow. So picture it, opening crawl, our iconic yellow text scrolling back into space. Since the destruction of the Galactic Empire, the Republic has enjoyed a period of growth and relative peace. The once scrawny rebellion has developed into the powerful Total Alliance, a symbol of strength and justice in the universe. But once cryptic rumors of a gathering darkness have become more concrete, and a new Imperial force seems to be forming in the shadows. Driven by their anxiety over this elusive but intensifying menace, the Total Alliance unleashes its war machine, echoing the ways of its old enemy, fighting viciously to suppress and crush any perceived threat. But as some begin to question the actions of the Total Alliance and the credibility of a reborn galactic empire, the real threat begins to reveal itself. Bred from an ancient evil, it will be far worse than our heroes could have possibly imagined. All right, so that's how I'm starting it off.
Excellent.
Now, going back into Episode 7, what this is, the catalyst for all this, is a plan, as a reminder, that Darth Vader set in motion between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. So the events of these films, again, tie into the original trilogy, Star Wars trilogy. And basically this force, this fighting force called the Tempest, that a secret army, basically, that Vader left in reserve with the Emperor's leave to call upon if needed. And he planted his young apprentice, Darth Geist, as the head of this Tempest army that he left in reserve with Geist, with a small sort of Knights of Ren-like group of Dark Jedi, all of the tech that they developed, and everything that would come to pass now. And as I'm not going to spell out too much. I'm just going to kind of read you what I wrote beat for beat, and just know that my story sort of ebbs and flows between events. So it ties in, again, a polarizing thing with Star Wars, but I did want to experiment with this. Tying in flashback is one thing. So I jump around. It is cohesive. So by the time you get to the end of my thing, you'll understand where it's going. But I also wanted to be purposeful with leaving enough mystery and cliffhanger for reveal in the last episode. So a lot of questions will be answered during the last episode. I don't want to do the thing where it felt like with Rise of Skywalker, where it was like, how many answers are they going to possibly fit into a 3-hour film? You know, we felt like that. Like, even if this film was 5 hours, in actuality, like, there's no way they could sort of recon and, you know, retcon and sort of answer all the questions that they set up in that for the final film. I didn't want to do that, but I do want to have enough question marks going into the last chapter, which I think will be fun. So, do you want to stop for a breath? Do you have any questions so far or anything like that?
I'm just writing some notes down. I mean, I'm good. I'm just listening.
Okay.
But I have no inquiries as of yet.
All right. So knowing now, you guys know, and Colin knows where everything is set up now. I'm going to start exactly where I want to start episode 8. I'm going to read off the page here. So we open on a modern city bordering a restless ocean. So I'm thinking, it's funny how your recent things, you know, that you've seen and heard tie in. So I'm thinking sort of a cross between Blade Runner and actual modern day Seattle. Picture that. Okay. Tall buildings spring from the fog and climb into the gray clouds above, making it appear like a floating metropolis. It's a tidy place, almost sterile, and throngs of people move about the streets in a sea of umbrellas to protect them from the driving rain. Despite its cleanliness and upkeep, there's a strange sense of danger pervading this place. 2 dark-clothed figures move through the bustling crowds with a sense of urgency, but balanced by a coordinated grace, not exhibited by any of the other thousands of figures moving to and fro. It makes them stand out. They continue to glide along swiftly like they realize they'll be noticed at any moment, and they are. Okay, so follow me now.
Okay.
High above the streets, somebody watches the dark-cloaked figures with great interest, pulling the high-power binoculars down to reveal the face of a blue-colored protocol droid. who curses a flurry of electronic bursts in some unknown language. The fearsome bounty hunter known as ZV6. Okay, so a little bit of character background for this character. Nice. Apparently once a working protocol droid, ZV6 has been completely overhauled, hacked, and rewired. It's unclear whether the internal reworking was performed by another or by ZV6 himself, though underworld rumors maintain that the protocol droid murdered his former masters in their sleep before massacring an entire spaceport and escaping in a stolen ship. So that's the rumors around this character. And it's, you know, a really kind of insidious and famous bounty hunter, demonstrating an autonomy and violent tendencies previously unheard of in any generation of protocol droid. ZV6 uses his appearance as easy cover, able to blend into any civilized environment unnoticed, even painting himself in order to evade detection if necessary. His exterior shell, in fact, is thick with chipping paint. His left hand and lower arm can be quickly swapped out for weapons. He has this high percussion grenade launcher that he uses, and he prefers a massive automatic laser incinerator rifle, which he wears slung across his back when not undercover, which is a strange and menacing sight for any unlucky onlooker. Basically, this lethal protocol droid. It looks like a protocol droid, but he may be painted, but he's got all this weaponry, maybe a bandolier, I'm not sure. So just picture that.
No, I love it. Well, because I love droid bounty hunters.
Yeah.
We don't, why and how, you know, with IG-88 and Forlom, like we obviously have a thing for this. I love the idea of a protocol droid also, or a droid working on itself.
Yeah.
In order to recreate itself, which is kind of meta.
Yeah.
So
like having that having that inner ability to like say, I don't want to be this. I want to be this. There's something, and, you know, especially if you want to go from being helpful to being, you know, lethal, that's interesting. Right. You know, especially if you think of the protocol droid we know best, C-3PO, this is the exact opposite.
I like that a lot. Love it. So,
and I think ZV6 moves with this reprogrammed medical droid called 010 that he actually reprogrammed as sort of operates in some sort of slave capacity to him. So that's like his cohort, but basically operates.
010 is a cool name. I like that.
You like that?
Yeah.
And he operates like humans deal with, you know, robots or astromech droids or something. He's just a tool, basically. So let's keep going on this planet. Now, of course, the pursued turn out to be Luke and Jin. Luke and Jin sensed that they were being watched, but that was inevitable, necessary even. This was a planet crawling with mercenaries and bounty hunters, and the duo needed information desperately. Drawing some of these cutthroats out into the open was the goal, and they knew only the best bounty hunters would detect their presence, so they could at least cut to the chase and not waste too much time. However, Luke and his young apprentice had not yet made the acquaintance of ZV6, but they soon would. So it's important to realize now, with the growing rumors of, you know, this reworked empire apparently coming into fruition, that the Total Alliance, their knee-jerk reaction is to nip this thing in the bud by any means necessary. And I'll explain exactly the tactics that they employ to this end. But we mentioned this in episode 7, but the Alliance is becoming very empire-like as they've grown in power. Now that there's some sort of threat to their sort of influence and to their place in the universe, they sort of are slowly becoming what the old Galactic Empire was, which is interesting. I hope. So we get to see Luke and his niece on an adventure together, which is taking place off screen during the last third of episode 7. So overlapping with around the same time that Lando, Chewie, and Owen are investigating strange rumors of an unsolicited ammo depot on an old Imperial territory. So, which is the way we end episode 7. So these events on the Seattle-like planet with Luke and Jin are taking place at around the same time episode 7 ends. Okay, so Luke and Jin are on this adventure at the same time. So again, I wanted to open with a fun flashback, see Luke and Jin together, sort of build that on-screen bond, their relationship together, because the events that are going to transpire will be important to harken back to this relationship. So I wanted to make sure I set that up. Now, what I didn't explain was Owen's death and the way we really didn't get into fleshing out what happened at the end of episode 7. So this is what happened in more detail. So we go back to Owen's death and we get a much more in-depth look at what happened, including the events leading up to the tragedy. There was a growing sense of anxiety rippling through the ranks of the Total Alliance. Maybe even a little paranoia was seeping in. Troubling rumors of the Empire slowly rebuilding itself brick by brick and heart by heart were feeding this elusive but palpable sense of dread. Small groups of former Imperial officers, soldiers, and pilots were being discovered almost daily now. Little pockets of, basically a rebellion. Seemingly conspiring in the shadows, building strength, and swelling their ranks for what the Total Alliance is fearing is a mighty return. The Alliance scrambled for any intel they could find. Who, where, or what was the ember responsible for stoking this fire, and how could they snuff it out? And how can they snuff it out quickly before it built? And meanwhile, the Republic fretted. They tried to smoke out the threat in any way they could, using torture, spies, mercenaries, bounty hunters, and carrying out vicious offensives, a lot of times unjustified, with civilian casualties. Desperate to keep this new threat at bay at, seemingly any cost. So that's a big part of the backstory that you got to kind of keep in the back of your head for what's happening here.
I was going to say, I love the rebels becoming the government, and then they're turning into exactly what they hated. It's a pretty common tale.
Yes.
Actually, I mean, the French Revolution ate itself and all sorts of other things, so it's like, I like it. It's got like an echo of history to it.
And how much of it can you be sympathetic to? Because you understand this great power. With great power comes great responsibility, right? They're the force for justice and good in the universe. So what do they need to do in order to snuff out, a sinister threat? And what's going too far? And the civilian casualties are starting to raise eyebrows. And of course, internally, especially Han and Leia and our heroes that we care about, Chewie and Lando and everybody. Wedge is going to be in the fold somewhere, of course, Akbar, all the people, all the carryover heroes. They're looking at this thing and like they have to sort of, not only do they have to question it, but they're also partially in charge of it. So how much of it isn't sitting well with them, basically? So to get into our story with Lando and Chewie and Owen and this mission, when undercover operatives reveal credible information regarding a hidden weapon depot stockpiled with decades-old Imperial ships, artillery, and other tech, Lando and Chewie are asked to undertake a mission to investigate this. When Owen insists that he join them on his adventure, Lando and Uncle Chewie naturally refuse. Now, Owen's in his young teens. He's a talented X-Wing pilot, but he's way too young to go on a mission like this. So the uncles refuse, and so what ends up happening is Owen steals their flight coordinates from the Falcon and sets out ahead of Lando and Chewie in his faithful X-Wing. And here's another character building moment with some new characters that I thought would be interesting to introduce. Accompanying Owen are his dear friends and loyal wingmen, Chase and Vex, also known as the Shadow Twins, as the two 17-year-old pilots have sworn to protect their little brother with their lives, arguing that Owen will never survive to make it to the flight academy without them. So they're, like Jin has the character of Gray sort of as a bodyguard. These are just people. These are two slightly older pilots, also very talented, that become, I guess really essentially Owen's best friends, but that protect him, that feel a sense of protectiveness over their young friend, knowing his familial importance, but also just because they love him. And I wanted to harken back. I wanted to kind of salute, the Rick Hunter, Ben Dixon, Max Sterling triumvirate of Robotech, which I grew up loving, which were like, the hero pilot and his two wingmen who became characters unto themselves. So that was kind of a salute to Macross. And the three young pilots plan to surprise Lando and Chewie outside the destination coordinates of their mission, but are distracted by a mysterious form so massive that it's being picked up by their radars from an enormous distance away. It's unheard of that something so far away would be popping up on radar for them. The trio jump to light speed in order to investigate and are horrified at what they discover. A ship so vast that it literally swallows up space, casting everything in its shadow. So picture a ship that you cannot possibly see with the naked eye the beginning and end of. When you're around it, that fills up your entire periphery. This thing is just unhumanly, impossibly gigantic. So
Interesting.
So when this happens, they kind of pop up out of hyperspace, arrive at this thing. They're not expecting this. They think they're on this fun adventure. They pop up into this thing that's just like this anomaly that's like unheard of. Like they're just completely taken aback. And the X-Wing pilots, they can't get their bearings. They're young kids. They're paralyzed with fear. And they're set upon by a swarm of savage-looking fighters and quickly swallowed up in a flashing fireball, perishing tragically and cruelly and unheroically, which is a dark thing for Star Wars, for kids to be dying like this. Is something we haven't really seen.
Yeah.
And I wanted to play up that tragedy and the viciousness of this as of yet unknown enemy, So they never had the chance. This is important to remember. The three kids never had the chance to tell anybody about the squadron of TIE Maelstroms, which is like this new TIE fighter tech that Vader invented, or the star-swallowing anomaly that they were protecting. So they died sort of taking in this mystery and never being able to share it. Okay, so that's important to remember.
Yeah, I love that. Very cool. Okay.
And again, I wanted to make this an emotional roller coaster. I wanted to sort of go back and forth between the fun Star Wars and the more dramatic Star Wars. So we have Luke and Jin's adventure. They're up against, we have to play up the point of ZV6 being this really a challenge for them, something that's going to really present a problem, a formidable foe to go up against.
Well, because
I wanted to go back and forth.
I was going to say they can't use Jedi mind tricks or anything on him, right?
Right. That's another thing, that you're only going to be, there's certain things that are taken out, certain powers that are taken out of the equation when you're fighting robots. I guess they kind of explored that a little bit with your favorite dude from the Star Wars prequels. What's his name?
Oh,
Grievous.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
But something like that, where it's like,
Awful.
Not this is a bounty hunter not cowed by Jedi, certainly.
Right.
Okay, so you know what? I just want to make sure so that emotional ebb and flow, the highs and lows are important to me. So hopefully that what I'm saying so far works in that regard, because I want to have fun too, but I also want to paint. I want to see our old heroes and our new heroes grieving together and undertaking a mission as a result of these things that happen, which is something that we waited for since 1983. We want to see our heroes in the thick of shit, and facing this formidable challenge that's going to, paint this, actually, when you're watching a Star Wars film, I want you, at least my films, I want you to think like maybe they're not going to succeed. Maybe they won't achieve victory this time. I want it to be that, that dark. So, okay, so now we cut to a new scene. We fade in on a swamp shrouded in fog. Daylight tries to break through the thick and tangled brush, but finds little success. The sounds of hundreds of animals sounding off in unison, insects, toads, lizards, birds. The atmosphere is thick with humidity, but there's a stinging chill in the air, too. Dark, dank, and disagreeable. Of course, we're talking about Dagobah. A set of small feet, swift, run through a shallow, muddy stream, paying no mind to the slithering snakes or hissing rodents left in her wake. An encouraging voice, a teacher's voice, shouts instructions, echoing amongst the vines. Luke has returned to Dagobah to train with his young niece, joined by the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan and Yoda in this scene. So I wanted to have, and also Anakin suspiciously absent from this. Force ghost Anakin nowhere to be found. They don't discuss it, but he's not there. So it's important to note that.
Interesting.
A fun training montage exhibiting Jin's precocious Force powers, teleportation, her blinding speed. Again, her fighting with a lightsaber no-handed, so basically manipulating this lightsaber in space so she could use her hands to do other, Force things. So essentially, he's fighting like a three-handed foe, human foe, which I thought would be interesting. And we get to see the mentor-student and uncle-niece relationship, again, with the two characters, and that's on full display. The bond, the affection between Luke and his niece Jin, and the mutual love. I really wanted to play that up. This was something that we've talked about, Kyle, missing, especially from the prequel trilogy between Obi-Wan and Anakin, where you didn't really get... They briefly touched on it, but you really didn't get that bond and that love between the two, which would have really played up the tragedy to come. So I want to make sure that that's on full display here between Luke and Jin. And also just the fun of Luke having a disciple, having an apprentice and someone that he's working with and also is active with. He's not just sitting there like a Yoda with his cane, Indian style, and being the guru. He's still a young Jedi, although the end of his prime, still in his prime and still dynamic in his own way. So I thought that would be fun. I thought that would be a lot of fun.
I like this too, because I feel like it helps fix one of the major errors of the prequels, which was just jumping so quickly from young Anakin to adult Anakin, because it did skip the entire point in which Obi-Wan loses Qui-Gon and then takes Anakin and bonds with him. We just missed that entire thing. And then we're supposed to expect that we care about their relationship by the time Attack of the Clones occurs.
Exactly.
So it's cool to dive deeper into that, because I agree with you. Like they're basically, we see Obi-Wan and Anakin as adults, and they're rivals like almost immediately.
Yeah, so it's true. It kind of jumps, you know, and that's also important to note. Like, it's kind of cool that we have the sequel trilogy and the prequel trilogy and even some offshoot things and now Legends works and everything, because it gives us something to bounce off of. If we didn't have those things, we might have sculpted our stories in a different way, but it reminds us not only of the things that we enjoyed, but also the things that we perceive as missed opportunities that we want to go in now and retcon. Sure. So now that we could be a little self-indulgent and do that, it's kind of fun. You know, it's kind of cool. Like, oh, I would have rather it this way. So now I could actually try my hand at that. Okay, so we go back to this Dagobah scene, which is a flashback. It's not too long in the past, but again, I wanted to make sure we built structurally. I'm not sure how it would work if I sat down and tried to incorporate and juxtapose all these scenes back to back, but I wanted to make sure I showed that Luke-Jin dynamic and that, you know, this is a father and daughter type relationship, the closest type of family relationship that you could imagine, really. And I like the warmth there, too, with that. So by the time Lando and Chewie arrived, it was far too late. Only realizing what happened after home base received the data that the 3 specific X-Wings had been obliterated, the duo rushed to the Falcon and jumped to the required coordinates, finding nothing. Nothing at all. Just a slice of empty outer rim space. Grief struck, they returned home to share their devastating news with their friends. Which is, you know, that's going to be pretty dark. So now we cut back to present day, Luke and Jin on our rainy, gray ocean planet. Our cloaked heroes being pursued. The bounty hunter's EV-6 bears down on his prey as the rain continues to pound the city. Skywalker and his young apprentice were known for stalking mercenaries, trapping them and squeezing them for information. So again, it's important that you understand that Luke and Jin are acting as employees of the Total Alliance. And what they do is the same thing that Lando and Chewie were going to do, and that Han is also involved in, is like stalking bounty hunters, hopefully the best bounty hunters, to basically ply them for information on what they know of this seemingly reborn Imperial Force Empire, because the Total Alliance, even though they employ mercenaries and bounty hunters, figure that if the Empire is returning, they're doing the same thing. So how can they sort of squeeze these mercenaries and these cutthroats for info? And that's, again, what they're doing. And it's sort of like dark, clandestine, sort of dark ops, black ops tactics for an alliance. And I loved, and you loved too, I know, Kyle, what Rogue One did with that. The film Rogue One did with that.
Definitely.
Where it shows the seedy side. It shows the dark side of what the Alliance would have to do in order to successfully combat, you know, a giant, oversized, overpowered faction like the Empire. So I love the fact of, like, you know, any force, you know, you could say the same thing about the United States. God knows what goes on between the CIA and black ops and clandestine operations and, you know, embedding yourself in starting wars between other countries and all those dark things. It's kind of fascinating to think, like, an organization as huge as the Total Alliance would probably need to dabble in that sort of stuff. You know,
certainly, yeah.
So they're being pursued, stalked by this ZV6. He's bearing down on his prey. Of course, Skywalker and Jyn, Luke and Jyn are there to, you know, sort of see what they could. They're there on a specific mission, but they're being pursued by somebody who's maybe a little more savvy than what they're used to. And so ZV6's stance is, but this time the Jedi do-gooders had met their match, and he knows it, you know. So ZV6 would destroy Skywalker, and his employer would be most pleased. Now, we got to imagine who his employer could be here. Shrouded by the driving rain from a vantage point high above his enemies, sort of a sniper position picture, the crafty bounty hunter leveled his incinerator rifle and prepared to squeeze the trigger. So this guy, this robot, this protocol droid / bounty hunter robot has the drop on Luke and Jyn. And a lot of it has to do with the rain and, you know, Jyn and Luke having their wires crossed. But you could imagine like, oh shit, like this guy must be really good. I want to play that up. But then, in a blinding flash, in an instant, ZV6 was reduced to a smoldering pile of parts. Burning on that lofty balcony, his laser rifle twisted and melted into a bubbling blob. A familiar silhouette moved swiftly on a nearby balcony, stowing his smoking weapon and then activating his jetpack before flying to a nearby rooftop and disappearing into the shadows. So,
the Boba Fett.
This is the return of Boba Fett.
Nice.
And why did he, what's going on? Like, you know, I want to just see the silhouette. I want to really you know, keep it elegant. I don't want to show too much. I want it to be quick, but I wanted you to walk away knowing that was Boba Fett and that he just saved Luke and what the hell is going, he's alive and what the hell is going on.
No disintegrations. Yeah. By the way,
nice. Well done. That's true.
Thank you. It's so funny you said that. Just real quick, total aside, but I bought a no solicitations sign for my door because we get a lot of people, and I was thinking it would be funny to have a Darth Vader sign that says no disintegration.
Dude, that's
no
brilliant.
Solicitations.
Oh,
yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. You would totally you could make money on that.
No solicitations. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
That's good stuff. So we've gotten through the bulk, at least 3/4 of the film.
Okay.
So the way it's going to resolve is, again, I wanted to play up that sort of dark tragedy. Lando and Chewie return to Han and Leia and the Total Alliance forces, the Rebel forces, our old heroes and the new ones. You know, Luke's Jedi Academy is there. Our heroes are all converging now back at home base, you know, wherever that is. And Luke and Jyn arrive back safely too, thanks to this shadowy bounty hunter figure returned from the grave. And they're just grief-stricken. You know, they share the news. They know what happened. They don't know exactly who did this. They, you know, could sort of intimate that it's this dark building, this new empire that's forming that was responsible for this. But what's actually happening is that Darth Vader's secret army under Darth Geist is pulling the puppet strings of this. They're sort of, what's happening is they're creating this whole story, this whole guise of a returning empire. And there is a returning dark force, but it's not the empire, it's them. So they're basically pulling the puppet strings of these bounty hunters. They're telling these old imperial sort of Nazi-like figures and hiding, like picture like real life like Nazi figures hiding in Argentina, right?
Right.
Like pulling those guys out of the shadows by promising like you're going to be returned to importance. You're going to be, you know, the mantle of the empire is growing and you're going to be a figurehead in this. Like basically planting the seeds of this returning empire, but it's all lies. They're lying to the Total Alliance. They're lying to these people that want a new empire, you know, the upbringing of a new empire. They're lying to the mercenaries. They have everybody in their puppet string because they're returning and they want to sort of misdirect.
I love that. So even Boba Fett is being tricked.
No, we don't know anything about Boba Fett. Boba Fett has his own. It's important to say that we won't know more about Boba Fett yet. But here's the thing with Boba Fett. I always thought it would be cool to have, very simple premise, but I always thought it would be cool to have Boba Fett and Luke fighting back to back. Putting all the old baggage behind them, what he did to Han, all that, how important it would have to be for those two to get to work together against the common enemy, and how cool that would be. Sort of a Luke Boba thing, again, a Jedi Mandalorian thing, which I think is kind of fascinating. Old enemy is a fox and the hound type dynamic where they have to work together against a common foe. And maybe, we'll spell this out more in the last episode, but maybe Boba Fett going into it where he wants revenge on Luke. Don't forget what happened to this guy. And I want him damaged, like maybe even missing an arm, having a robotic arm or something. I want the Sarlacc pit to be, I don't want him to come unscathed from what happened to him. I want him to be driven by the horrors that he went through, physical and mental, the anguish and everything like that. Maybe initially coming back to say nobody's killing Luke except me. So hence the ZV6 assassination and everything. Right. But maybe growing into a relationship where it becomes necessary to work with Luke against the common enemy. And maybe a friendship forms out of that, or maybe it's just a thing in terms of efficiency and, wanting to get something done and wanting to take care of a common enemy. So something that would be worth exploring, and something that could keep the audience guessing in terms of that. And then I really want to go out with, one thing I do have to figure out that I realized was a problem maybe last night when I was writing the last bits of this, was I do want to show Darth Geist and the Tempest a little more in all of this. But I also want to pepper that in somewhere, but not too much, because I really want a great payoff with this enemy. Again, that sort of missed opportunity with the Knights of Ren, where we never got to know what the hell these guys were or who they were individually, of course, like nothing. There was no payoff with that. So completely fly in the face of that and just say, okay, I want to really spell out who these guys are. Geist, his main 6 dudettes, whatever, and what they're all about, and really sort of string you along with the mystique, and then actually give a proper payoff in the last episode. So I want to do that, but I do want to have a little more of this character. I have to be careful because there's a big payoff with this character too. I want to have this character a little more embedded in episode 8, but I'll figure that out. Where I want to end this with a great cliffhanger going in is that they're grief struck. 2 things have to happen. They're grief struck. And what has to happen now is a strain in the relationship between Luke and Jyn. Okay. Jyn finds out, although she's a very even-keeled, seemingly Yoda-esque for her age, what is this tragedy going to do even to a sort of even-tempered, guru-like, old, sort of beyond her years character? She has wisdom beyond her age, but what is this tragedy going to do when to a young girl who loses her brother, even somebody of this stature, and to cause a strain between her and Luke? So that's important. So everybody's grief stricken by the loss of Owen. They don't know what happened. The thing is completely unnerving because it's completely shrouded in mystery. They have no real leads on what's going on, and Jyn decides that she's going to take matters into her own hands. Against Luke's warning, he's empathetic, of course, but he's like, you can't. Let's wait until we know more. Basically, we don't know what we're jumping into here at all. And again, them thinking like this is the bones of the reborn empire, but it's much darker than they know. And Luke, has the wisdom to know that could be the case. When Jyn, the character of Gray, you guys will remember, you have to listen to the episode 7 podcast, who is like the slightly older bodyguard. He's the Jedi in Luke's academy who's obsessed with the dark side. So Jyn, Gray, of course, who he has like a blood oath to Jyn. And another, it's basically Luke's small academy of like a dozen people are basically split in half. 5 or 6 stay behind with Luke. They have to sort of make the decision who they're loyal to, Luke or Jyn. And this sort of small group is split asunder, basically in half. Gray and Jyn being one of the contingent going off. Gray's going to go wherever Jyn goes. And then I want this other character that I was thinking of. I don't know this character's name yet. Could be a boy or a girl. Could be a really nice opportunity for a young female Jedi Academy student. But I wanted to have, and let me know what you think of this, Kyle. I wanted to have a character who was a great swordsman with a lightsaber with absolutely no force power at all. It's just completely conventional talent, almost like a wedge of the Jedi Academy, who decides to fight with a lightsaber but does not have any force abilities. Just a masterful swordsman. Or woman. So I want to make sure that character, that young character, maybe they're 10 or 11 years old, goes off with Jin too. And maybe that she or he comes from a group of people who embraced this samurai-esque lifestyle where they choose to fight with a lightsaber. Now, in this world, you could understand, you could fight with any sort of bladed weapon, but if you have to deal with lightsabers, it's probably best to fight with lightsabers, which is why they embraced the lightsaber. Now, in things like fiction, actual fiction, like The Mandalorian, there's like vibranium or whatever it's called, which is like a metal that they developed that is very, very valuable. That, I think that's what it's called. And that has the strength to fight, parry with a lightsaber. But I thought my characters would be kind of cool with a lightsaber.
No, I dig that. I mean, I remember that from even from the Star Wars RPG in the 90s, the paper and pencil one, they had things called like vibro blades and stuff that non-Jedi users can use.
So different tech.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of like that sort of, I have to flesh out my Jedi Academy character more. I'm having fun with that. But somebody who has no force powers was just like a formidable swordsman. I think that's really cool. He or she goes off with Jin. And then, of course, the contingent that stays behind with Luke, certainly the twins, the Jedi triplets, rather, Triss, Tross, and Tress, who will fight with like the telepathic link with each other. And then I'm thinking of another character who's maybe like the youngest girl in the group. This is interesting. Let me know what you think of this. This is another character designy thing, but I thought it was fun. A character who's really young and very, full of the Force, very powerful with her Force abilities, but doesn't really know how to channel it. And like any little girl, gets very scared when, it's the question of conflict, and basically puts up this impenetrable force field around her, which is naturally kicked on, and is too emotional or afraid to fight. So basically gets shrouded in this force field. So she's impenetrable. She can't be destroyed, but she's also completely ineffective because she won't fight. So having this character who's like kind of handy to have around if she would only do something, because she can't really be destroyed once this force field goes up, but she also can't do battle. So a character who Luke's trying to sort of coax out, her abilities and sort of figure out how they could make her a proper Jedi Knight. And maybe, her payoff comes in the last episode too, where she could go from being ineffective to effective and having that maybe the most powerful one of all, but just doesn't know how to channel it yet. I thought that would be a really fun character too. Definitely. So that's really where it ends. And where I wanted to end it, Jin goes off, Luke's Jedi Academy's split, the family's kind of split. It's very emotional. There's a lot of grief. They really don't know where to go for answers. It seems like they're up against these really dynamic odds. And then right at the end, I want them to see on the radar this gigantic thing that only we know about and the dead 3 X-Wing pilots know about. That they go up on this screen, but it's not just one. It's like a bunch of these things that are just like way too enormous to even comprehend. And then it's like, I want that to be the payoff of them realizing what Owen died knowing. And then I want us to know that right on the last beat of the film. And that's it. That's how we end. And that's how we're going to go into episode 9.
I love it. I mean, I love a lot of things about your story, but I really dig this idea of including more children in the story, which we don't really see very much of. Like, right, you see it in episode 1, they have like the terrible actors with, at the pod race, and you see like a few other things, but kids are certainly going to be an important part of this universe, and we don't really get to see their inclusion in it. We see them a little bit in like the academy with Yoda and stuff in episode 2, I think, or whatever. Because I know you and I, and we brought it up in the past, we did an episode about Final Fantasy IV. You and I both have an affinity for that game, and my favorite characters in that game are Porum and Palom, as everyone knows, the twin mages. They're 5 years old in that game.
That's so 5. Cool. So cool.
5 years old. So they're fighting with like, Yang, who's like, in his 30s, and Edge is like in his teens, and Edgar and or not Edgar, I'm sorry, Cecil and Kane are in their 20s or whatever, and then they have 2 5-year-olds in their party.
So cool.
And they go into battle with them, and then they cast like an immense magic and like destroy enemies. As little 5-year-olds, and then they sacrifice themselves.
Yes. Oh, such a great emotional
And I was
scene.
always really fascinated by like kids that are in over their heads, or so they seem, and then they are the ones that encapsulate like the most honor or do what's right. Like Poor Palom. I mean, the game is from 1991. You have had you've had 30 years to play it. But it looks like Poor Palom commits suicide to save the party in the game. In fact, you're led to believe that for a very long time in the game.
Oh, yeah.
That they killed themselves to save everyone. And then you find out later that they're actually still alive. But that was the most powerful stuff in that game because they're kids, you know? And so I really love that you focus on that in your story.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, it feels very Dagan, right? Very anime-esque. I have to show restraint with that. Not just the anime-esque as far as being kids, but, you know, sort of the anime tie-ins with the powers and dynamic weapons and, you know, really dramatic abilities. Like you have to show, I want to do the fun things, but I want to also practice a little bit of restraint. So hopefully I don't go overboard with that where it stops feeling like Star Wars, but thanks, dude. I appreciate that.
Well, in the middle, you know, it's the Empire Strikes Back or Attack of the Clone kind of Attack of the Clones type situation where these middle episodes are roads to a conclusion. So it's hard to really have anything in self-encapsulated. Like when you think about Empire Strikes Back, you have Hoth and Bespin, but you don't. They're actually both huge downers. They lose in both of them, and it's like a means to an end. And one of the things I loved about when I was thinking about Boba Fett, first of all, I love, you know, he's back there, right there.
Where is he?
On my shelf right there. If you see where it's a little cup right there.
Boba Fett.
Is that Luke and him actually don't interact? Because when you think about Luke slices his gun barrel or whatever, on the skiff in Jedi, but when you think about Boba Fett going to Bespin, well, first he's on the Executor, then he goes to Bespin. Like Luke is actually going there at the same time. They never really run into each other. Luke, like I think they fire at each other a few times. Yeah. Then he gets to the Slave One and leaves, and then when they get to the palace, like the only time you ever see Boba Fett, you know, he like lifts his gun when all the shit happened, which is awesome, and all. But like they never really do interact.
No.
Boba Fett's way more fixated on Han Solo because of their history, and so and because of the task at hand from Vader. Vader doesn't give a shit about, you know, Vader's trying to draw Luke alive. So yeah, I love it, Dig. I'm excited to hear your conclusion.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And I also wrote down with ZV6 and 010. You know, got to get some toys for them at least, even though they're
we got to see what they. I was trying to think of a color. Like, is he like midnight blue when we see him? Now, you know, it's said that he paints himself in order to sort of further the disguise or the undercover nature of just being a protocol droid. Like, I'm just a protocol droid that I'm going to assassinate you type of thing. But yeah, what a cool color would be. But, you know, essentially just looking like a conventional protocol droid. But then when he has that weaponry strapped to himself, it's like, what? That's not an ordinary protocol droid.
We don't need a protocol droid. All right. So I'll give you mine now. I want to remind people a few things, kind of self-contained rules that I put myself into. Yeah. Number one, and you, again, like Dagan said, and we said at the top, I would encourage you to just go listen to the old episode. You really shouldn't be listening to this one without having listened to that one first. But I wanted to try to take things, characters specifically from the original, or not from the original, but from the 7, 8, and 9 as they are constituted. Yeah. In order to kind of try to limit myself and try to take what I thought worked positively, at least from a character point of view, from those movies. So people will see familiar characters. And I've also tried to think really small with the story. Very few locations, very few characters, and really all about the beat to beat stuff as opposed to the very Star Wars Mos Eisley Cantina 7,000 characters. And, you know, like I don't want to do that.
I like this.
All right, so you guys might recall in the last movie, or in episode 7, we're introduced to a few situations, and I'm just kind of reading through my notes here to kind of catch everyone up. So what it basically is about is in the vacuum of the Empire being destroyed in Return of the Jedi, a corporation rises to take its place in this power vacuum. It's not a government, called Hail Systems, and Hail Systems is run by a religious prophet named Karen. Karen is a Force user, but claims to have no midichlorian count, and travels around the galaxy doing these evangelical events to tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that also don't have midichlorians, and gives them Force powers. And the company has a military, which is led by Hux and Phasma from the original movie. Poe is in the original movies. Poe is also in it as Chewbacca's wingman because Han Solo is currently under some sort of spell, as we find out, and we'll get into more of this in this movie. And then Leia's still in it. She's royalty. She's not in the government, but she's around. And so that's basically where it leads us. They have twin kids named Jaina and Jason, which are drawn from the Legends Han Solo stories. They're both Force users. Jaina is more akin to a light user. Jason more akin to a dark user, although they're both generally good people. Anyway, so that's kind of where we left it. I guess there's another important point. Chewie and Poe are working for the Hutts on Tatooine with a turncoat soldier named Finn from Hail Systems in order to pursue something for the Hutts that will then get them the information they need on what's going on with Luke Skywalker, who, by the way, has vanished and is barely in the first movie. All right, so you guys can go listen to the first one and catch yourself up. But here's the crawl for my second one.
Okay.
And by the way, I tried to limit my writing. I actually wrote more this time than I did last time, but I tried to do it in 8 beats. So like 8 story beats.
Oh, very cool.
Which is what I did in the first one too.
Super cool.
So here's the crawl before we get into the beats.
Okay.
Mega Corporation Hail Systems has identified its target. Force Prophet Karen has uncovered a previously unknown far-flung planet teeming with Kyber, the most powerful natural substance in the universe. Unaware of the existential threat the colonization of this new planet represents, the New Republic continues to seek the missing war hero and Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, who is apparently in league with Karen and his military leader, Commander Hux. Only through networking in the criminal underworld does the New Republic stand a chance of finding Luke and uncovering Hail Systems' intent. ... All right, so that's the crawl.
Nice.
That begins the movie.
Well done.
And by the way, I have not named my movies like Dagan has, so ideas for names is always welcome.
Oh yeah.
All right, so here's what I wrote. The film begins with Han Solo, who we never saw in any great detail in the first film. Tossing and turning in a bed, in a dimmed room, he uses an intercom to call for Leia and his kids. In the midst of a months-long unknown spell, Solo has largely stayed away from his family so as to not worry them. He's also occasionally incomprehensible, inconsolable, and manic, though no one understands why. However, when he calls upon his family and only Leia and his daughter Jaina show up, he instantly becomes curious about Jason. He learns that several days ago, Jason got into an X-Wing and jumped to unknown coordinates. Furious that he wasn't told earlier, Solo pops back into action, taking a knee at one time due to an immense headache he suffers. He grabs his trademark blaster and holster and asks where Chewie and Poe are. Learning that Chewie and Poe have gone to Tatooine in search of Luke, Han decides to follow. So that's how the movie begins. We finally see Harrison Ford or Han Solo.
I love it.
He's in a dark room. He's trying to talk to his kids. We don't really know what's wrong with him. He seems there's something up with him. So that's how we're introduced to
Very
that
cool.
situation. So that's kind of like the first wave.
I love seeing Han, and I love you incorporating the corporate thing, like the mega corporation, because you usher in the tones of cyberpunk, which is something I think that would work so well. I didn't do this at all. Would work so well with Star Wars. And yeah, I love finally seeing Han Solo. That's a great payoff, especially for the beginning of the film, because we don't see him, right? We don't see him at all in the beginning.
No, they just reference him basically about so like there's something wrong with him. That's where we find out that Poe Dameron is kind of like his replacement. Like right. Chewie kind of has taken to this young kid. But even Poe is anxious to meet, it could be said that Poe maybe even doesn't know Han or that they're not close,
That's super interesting. Love that.
So yeah, now we finally get Han. We realize, as we learned last time, and to kind of talk about episode 7 a little bit, Luke is talking to Jason through the Force and is summoning him basically. And Jaina has kind of been resistant to that. So she sticks around. So Jason's gone. We don't know where he went, but he took an X-Wing. He stole an X-Wing and he left. On Tatooine, we find Chewie, Poe, and Finn, who are in the midst of their work for Rhaegar the Hutt. So we'll remember that Rhaegar is kind of like the new power player in the Hutt family.
I love it.
Rhaegar's task for the 3 men is simple in premise, as we finally learn. Go to the forest moon of Endor, over which the battle of the second Death Star took place. There, it's rumored that immense pieces of usable debris rest not only in orbit around the moon, but on the surface of the moon as well, a location Chewie in particular knows well. Rieger is in a race with other corporate and criminal rivals to recover as much of the second Death Star as possible, as some of the technologies, materials, alloys, and more that were used to create it have virtually limitless value, largely because much of late Imperial technology has been lost. Thus, the three dispatched to the Forest Moon in their ship Centurion. We'll remember that the Millennium Falcon is gone.
That's
They
right.
have this new kind of iconic ship that my movies will have, which is called the Centurion.
So bold.
When they come out of their jump, they see a moon with what is essentially a ring system of debris, slowly falling to the surface of the moon a year at a time. So picture going back to Endor the exact way we saw it in episode 6, but there's like a ring system around it, which is just the remnants of the Death Star.
Oh my God, so cool.
All of the second Death Star and all of there's different people that are trying to get this stuff. They want it. They're interested in all the Imperial technology that might have survived. They're interested in how they built it again so quickly, all these other things. And it's kind of unknown because the Empire kind of was squashed quickly. There might have been remnants elsewhere, but everyone was on the second Death Star or fighting around it. And so most of them are dead. So no one really even understands how this thing works. They want to know. And so the criminal enterprises in this vacuum want to go back to Endor, and the military and other kind of more, let's say, regular forces stay away because they don't want to fight again. And there's just too many forces that play in Endor. So they just have kind of been like, fuck it, we'll just leave that place alone.
So cool.
So it's like a graveyard now. And who knows what's going on with the Ewoks and shit. Maybe they're having a little guerrilla war down there too. All right. So far we have, we've been introduced to Han. We know that Jason went into the X-Wing. We know that Jaina is still with her family on Tatooine. We have Chewie, Poe, and the turncoat Finn working for Rieger the Hutt, instructed to go to Endor. So that's where we stand now.
So cool.
So that's about a fourth of the way through the movie.
Okay.
The next series of scenes involve Karen, who we've gotten little time with to this point. So the people will remember that the seventh movie ends with Karen giving one of his like sermons before hundreds of thousands of people, and like it's this ruckus kind of 1980s or 1990s style American mega church. People are fainting and doing all sorts of crazy shit. So the next scene involves Karen, who we've got little time with. Karen is on his flagship called the Prophet, a converted super star destroyer. His is but one ship in an ever-moving corporate armada. As he walks through his quarters and stares out a window towards an unknown planet below, Luke Skywalker walks in unannounced to join him. The two seem comfortable with one another. Karen explains to Luke that he couldn't have found this planet, which he names Kenobi, without his assistance. Luke remains largely silent but listens to Karen's exposition. The Kyber-ridden planet can be mined into oblivion, he notes, creating virtually endless amounts of revenue for Hail Systems. It will also allow Karen, Luke, and other Force-sensitive persons to enhance their powers substantially.
Oh, wow.
Karen notes clearly what the audience should have already figured out. Luke agreed to help Karen in return for greater power. So this plays with this what I think is already always a tension with Luke, although I don't know that it's explored very well. Luke in A New Hope is like, the farm boy who wants to do things. He wants more power. He wants more excitement. He wants more whatever. And he finally starts to succumb to it. Through a real promise of power through a person who doesn't seem overtly evil to him. It's important to note that Karen isn't necessarily evil. I mean, we don't know yet. But it's certainly the Hail Systems is not the Empire. We don't really get into it or whatever. And I wrote some notes about it because it doesn't really, I'm like writing fan fiction. I'm not going to get too into it, but like, it's possible that Hail Systems is economically viable because they make products people buy. Like they might be a respected company of some sort. They just happen to be run by this really strange dude. And there are companies, I mean, think about like SpaceX and Tesla run by Elon Musk. Like they're run by these like enigmatic, weird dudes. So Karen is one of them. And in order to use he's using Luke's force powers and kind of coerce him to come over because he's saying like, we have Kyber in such amounts on this planet that you can't even imagine. Like what, like you used to have to go to like Ilum or these random places and like, mine it and you get a little piece of it and you make your lightsaber. Everybody's like, there is more Kyber on this planet than you have any idea what to do with. And so Luke agreed to help him. And so they're partners.
That's so cool.
And Karen promises Luke access to this planet.
Right.
Which he also tells Luke, by the way, is possibly where the Force is even emanating from and where like the religious aspects of the Force, which Karen heavily believes in, as opposed to the midichlorian part of it, might also emanate from this planet.
Very cool. Dude, so cool. I love seeing some Luke displaying some gray tendencies, actual desires. And, maybe, again, like you said, he doesn't know Karen is necessarily evil. He doesn't think he's necessarily, unscrupulous or dark in any way. And why would Luke want these powers? Maybe it's for good. Very strong. I mean, the whole thing, and I know I mentioned this in the first one, I love seeing the sort of evangelical, cultish, again, those sermons with, populated with thousands of people, and seeing it in a Star Wars universe so you could have multi-breed, not just humans, but, dude, I could picture it all in my head. It's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. So, all right, so that's where we leave that 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 of 8 paragraphs. So we now see Han Solo in an unknown ship messing with telemetry and scouring through digital files. Heading to Tatooine was a feint to throw Leia off. Using New Republic droids, Solo figures out that Jason is heading towards a far-flung, largely unexplored section of the galaxy, a location he roughly knew from his days as a smuggler. It's a lawless fringe on the edge of Republic space. However, Solo is continuing to have physical and mental events that keep him from performing at his best. Radioing back to Coruscant, Solo notes that he's picking up an enormous number of ships, thousands and thousands of them, orbiting a planet in an ill-explored system. Against the advice of Leia after revealing that he lied about going to Tatooine and other Republic leaders speaking to him from afar, including Wedge, Solo endeavors to go check it out anyway. So cool. So now Solo is off so now both Jason and Han are just out. Okay. They're going to do their own thing. Luke is with Karen, Chewie, Poe, and Finn are working for the Hutts.
Okay. I love that. I love the irony of working for the Hutts also. Brilliant.
Right.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So now we're on the surface of Endor, with the Centurion in the distance on a ridge, with Poe, Chewie, and Finn working their way through a battlefield still riddled with debris, bodies, armor, weapons, helmets, and more. Every so often, one of them will stop to pick through things. Poe grabs dog tags from a few rebel soldiers left behind in the decades prior, so you'll see him every once in a while just grabbing dog tags off of dudes and kind of putting them in a pouch. They don't even really mention it. Rieger suggests that the secret to the second Death Star's shield generator, how it worked, the technology behind it, and more are buried in underground Imperial excavated caverns below the surface. He's most eager to understand it, steal the technology, and either utilize it for himself or more likely sell it. He's hearing, after all, rumblings of a great power that he might have to defend himself from. He encourages the trio to explore Endor carefully and find what he's looking for. In return, the information they seek will be theirs. They agree and get to work. So Rieger we're realizing now that Rieger, using his vast network of informants and all of that and all the people that work for him, he realizes something's happening that he has to defend himself against. While a lot of other criminal enterprises, smaller ones, maybe less organized ones, are going to Endor and risking it all to try to just grab pieces of the Death Star, to sell it, to scrap it, and hopefully find some technologies, he has identified that it was, and this is an important part of the second Death Star that we don't really talk about, there was a massive shield generated around it from the surface of Endor. And that technology has kind of been forgotten and left behind. And he's like, well, maybe we can understand this technology and use it, because I'm hearing from my people that some shit's going on, out in the, some system. Yeah. And we might need to understand how to better defend ourselves. So the Hutts are scared. And that's why they're working also with people that are rebellion aligned. So you kind of do that math, I guess.
Super cool.
So let's see. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's only 3 more beats here.
Okay.
Back on Karen's flagship, an X-Wing is seen docking. As it lands and Hail Systems tech swarms it, out emerges Jason Solo, looking around skeptically. He gets down from the ship, with techs making their way for him, parting as they see Luke in the distance. The two walk towards each other at first and then run. They embrace for a few beats. For the first time, we see Luke smile, the old Luke. Jason asks him why he was called for him and what he's doing. Luke explains that with the help of Hail Systems, he has been able to find the very source of the Force, a planet essentially made of kyber, one that radiates such energy as to negate any need for midichlorians. The Force, he giddily explains, will be for everyone. When Jason asks why Jaina or his mother couldn't come, Luke insists that they wouldn't understand. That they would proclaim his pursuit was over power. That might be of Karen's intent, he admits, but that isn't his. Sometimes, he explains, strange bedfellows must work together to get things done. So at this point, you realize that Luke is maybe in on the grayness of this.
Yeah.
That Luke is so dedicated to the Force and to access of the Force. And we see this, of course, in books and in film, where he gets into the Jedi Academy and he teaches and So he's really into it, and he wants to be an evangelical about it. And he's finding someone, a like-minded guy who also wants to be an evangelist for the Force. Luke is kind of interested in using it for all the positives. Karen is clearly interested in using it for power. Luke identifies that to Jason that he knows, but the strange bedfellows can both get what they want, or so Luke thinks.
So good, dude. I love the unlikely allies thing. It could really create great drama, because you don't know. Everybody's kind of in it for their own reasons. They might be on the up and up. They might not be, and I love just giving this. This is just enough humanity to give Luke, I think, just to balance him out and not make him so Jesus-like all the time is something I get caught up in. That's something that you can't really get caught up in as a writer. Like I tend to do that with Luke, where it's like you put him on a pedestal and you don't want him to, you want him to be like beyond a human. You want to make him godlike and sort of imbue him with like perfection. But I like this. I like sort of peppering Luke with some humanity, and you're just setting up a great story. But not to mention incorporating the second Death Star, which is like a love of mine, incorporating Endor, like tying in just enough of the old elements to ground it. Super, super good, man. I would make this movie in a heartbeat.
Thank you.
It's brilliant.
Maybe they'll make it one day. All right, so here's how things kind of wrap up in my last two paragraphs. Back on Endor, after much exploration, the trio find what they're looking for. A databank of schematics, formula, alloy composition, material locations, and more, not only in regard to the second Death Star's sophisticated shield system, but in its construction generally. After uploading the pertinent data to Rhaegar, he quickly agrees to tell the mercenaries what they want to know, as rumors have been circulating for more than a year in criminal circles. The corporation Hale Systems has stumbled upon a planet essentially made of Kyber, a planet that, if exploited properly, will give the company dominion over any government or other power in the galaxy. Rhaegar generally seems concerned about it. It's why he was eager to get the technology that was more accessible to him in order that he may protect his criminal enterprise. And he readily tells them what they want to know: the location of Hale Systems' armada, and hence the location of the planet itself. Relaying word back to Leia on Coruscant, the three head to the New Republic capital to regroup and make their next plan. So finally, we get what we want out of Rhaegar, which is the information. They're eventually, originally they're attracted to working for Rhaegar because of this turncoat from Hale. He doesn't really seem to know much, but is in the employ of Rhaegar, as we find out, and that's Finn. But we find out that Rhaegar, and obviously everyone else, knows everything that the guys need to know, and that he was willing to fulfill his end of the bargain in order to protect himself. So the Hutts are scared. They're working with rebellion people in order to protect themselves. Everyone kind of knows what each other's doing, and that it's all in pursuit of this information about what this prophet is doing. And what they find out again is that they found a planet that is just teeming with Kyber.
So cool.
The film ends with General Hux and Captain Phasma overlooking an enormous army assembling itself on the Armada's various ships. As the two assess the troops, Karen and Luke join them. The shot pans further and further out, showing the entirety of the vessel, then more ships swooping in and out of them, showing the magnitude of Hale Systems' organization and their intent to completely dominate this planet, which is apparently, as Luke notes in passing at the end, at the heart of the origin of the Force. So I picture a shot, maybe it takes a minute or maybe even 90 seconds, no language, no talking, where at first it begins behind, the leaders, and think about when the Emperor comes off of the shuttle and they're all assembled. But what you realize is as the camera's pulling in and out of the ships and going all around the Armada, that they're ready to attack this planet, full on, almost like a trade federation type, total invasion.
Yeah. Holy shit.
And that's how the film ends. Dude, so that's kind of how I just presented it. Yeah.
Dude, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, I love another thing that I'm realizing that you did. I don't know if I mentioned this last time. You're incorporating existing characters that they failed in real life, like Phasma and Hux, that could have been developed in a great way, but that they just didn't do justice to. I love you because I love you doing that, because you could take a character like that and just be completely turned off by it because they didn't work the way they did it. But you taking it and retconning it and making it into an actual character that that works is actually a bold thing. And speaking of bold things, such a bold flourish for you that I love that you did is getting rid of the Falcon. Because we talk about in good fiction, no one's safe, then no thing should be safe either. And it grounds it. It's like, oh, you could kind of mourn that. The Falcon's not there anymore, but it's still Star Wars. Characters could die, so characters get obliterated. Look at the Death Star. How many friggin' people died on those things when they, so you could actually get rid of a ship. It's okay, to do that.
Yeah, to me, I was like, well, let's create a new iconic ship. We're going to go back and what you notice is that with the exception of the Kyber planet, we're going to places, all these places we've been to already. I mean, Coruscant, Tatooine, and Endor are really the only places we go. And I wanted to keep it small. Like, I wanted to be like, it's the same thing Episode 7 tried to do with like echoing the, Episode 4, which I appreciated, but just echo like certain things. Like, why don't we go back to Endor? What is the state of Endor right now? Like, what happened to the second Death Star, and where is the shield generator? And like, that's a pretty powerful piece of technology. Why don't we talk about it? So like, writing my notes, I was like, well, let's answer some of those things and still get some of the common iconography. And we see X-Wings, but you would see with like Falcons, the Millennium Falcon, it would be conceivable. I mean, that ship by this point is maybe more than 50 years old. I don't know it would even be, you have to remember that like Lando and Han were dicking around with this thing decades ago. It's old.
Why is it relevant anymore? Yeah.
Right. It's not relevant anymore. Like, it's not, you don't want to fly the Millennium Falcon.
It's like a hot rod at this point.
Right. Exactly. It's like, so just retire it. It's like, we are the government now. We can afford to buy you like a better ship than the one you won in a gambling thing.
Super smart. And you're messing with structure too, Kyle. Like, you're not just taking the good guy versus the bad guy structure, which mine's a little more conventional in that regard. Like, you're bad guy. It's not a good versus bad thing out in the open yet. Really, maybe starting to intimate what's going on, but it's not this traditional conflict, allies and Nazis, or, opposing armies or whatever. It's something different. It's a different structure for Star Wars, but it still feels like your thing still feels so much like Star Wars, even though you're taking all these inventive turns and painting all these inventive touches that we haven't really seen in Star Wars. I think that's what Star Wars needs. It just needs to be done correctly, which is what you're doing. You know what I mean? This way you're breathing new life into something old, still making it feel like the thing that we love and care about, which is...
Well, thank you. I told you at the top, and it was, when we did the last episode, one of my major drivers for my story was to get rid of midichlorians, right? Like, if you could figure out a way to get rid of this shit, how would you do it? And it's like, well, Kyber, while it's like a force sensitive material. So how could you do something with this to make it more accessible? And how could you evangelize the force and make it into a religion? And all of that. So yeah, it's kind of some of the, and to also celebrate some of the characters, like you said, that they could have done something cool with, but didn't. And it's like I said last time, I don't picture General Hux and Phasma. Obviously I don't picture Phasma wearing a stormtrooper outfit. I picture just these characters as being just different iterations of leadership.
Yeah.
And I had brought up Handmaid's Tale, which I really love, and the commanders in that, the bad guys all wear suits and just have little stars on their suit jackets to show their their ranks and stuff. And that's how I picture them. And like I said, I even picture Phasma as being like almost sexy. Like, picture a chick with like a little skirt on and like a blaster rifle hanging off of her ass, and like she's totally sexy, but like is like the commander of all these.
That's cool.
People,
I love
and
that.
Stuff like that.
I love that, dude. It's so good. And the Metachlorians mission statement, the no Metachlorians mission statement is, I mean, what better thing to, base your movie around and get rid of an actually existing piece of a mistake, essentially.
Well, because wasn't the idea, I mean, didn't you always picture as a kid like that it was a religion?
Of course.
That it was like that it was something that anyone can kind of tap into, and maybe more people are sensitive to another. But if you can go to Dagobah, like Luke has it in him, I guess, in some way. But like, if someone else went to Dagobah for 10 years and studied with Yoda or whatever, would they also not be able to use the Force if they didn't have any midichlorians? Right. To me, if the answer is no, then that ruins Star Wars.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to be able to tackle that, and also just I want to keep the cast small, and I want to keep it. I want to, like you said, because someone did bring up the idea that like we do kind of deal with corporations in Episode 1, but not really. I mean, not really. It's all a means to an end. It's a trade embargo. I mean, they don't really even explain what the hell is going on or who the Trade Federation even is. It's cool that they exist, but it's not the same.
No. Yeah,
I just like the idea of saying like there is no new empire. Like they were fucking destroyed. Like now other groups of people there's gonna be a power vacuum, just like there always is. It's just not gonna be like a new imperial force. It's gonna be some fucking religious prophet in this case. So So that's where we leave it, and we move into episode 8. And so moving in episode 9. Now we know, we have the Hail Systems people ready to kind of land on the planet and start doing their thing there. Luke is with them. Han and everyone else, Poe, Chewie, are all kind of collecting themselves on Coruscant. Jane is still with them. Jason is with Luke.
Yeah.
And so it kind of starts to simplify, and the stakes are clear now of what's going to happen. And clearly Luke's going to figure out that Karen is bad.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so, and then we'll find out how that all goes.
That goes. And yeah, I mean, a lot, but I feel like you did answer a lot of questions in this one. You definitely fleshed out a lot more. We still we have some lingering questions about Han, but that's a nice sort of carrot going into episode 9, your episode 9. Yeah, man. I mean, it's just really, I mean, this was an Empire Strikes Back-esque episode for me. It's very strong. I'm really compelled by what you're doing here. I don't even really see any weak links or anything. Like it's just pound for pound good stuff. You know what I mean? It's strong.
Well, thank you. It's less character driven than yours. Because I love yours too. If you could almost meld the two styles together, you'd have like a true treatment for these movies. But again, like I like doing these exercises for the episode, but I also am stopping myself from getting too crazy for it, because I'm like, I hate fan fiction. And yeah, I really do. Like, I don't understand it. To each his own, but and I know some people have really, like, some creators have really shit on it, being like, I know the guys that, I think it's the guys that wrote The Expanse, are just like, make your own stories. Like, we made this.
Right.
We don't want you to write, And so it's like, it's a cool exercise, but I don't have an enormous amount of respect for fan fiction, frankly. And I'm not going to like sit here and spend hours and hours like on my notepads, like trying to figure out how to make this movie work. Cause it's like, I'd rather use that creative energy ultimately for new things, but it's still a fun exercise. And we have one more to do.
One more to go. Yeah. It's a fun exercise within reason. I hear what you're saying. You could definitely spend that energy on doing your own thing. I'm of that mind too, but yeah, I mean, and with Star Wars, I think it's a little more acceptable especially because so many of us are unhappy with what was done beyond the initial trilogy. So it's like, all right, like, I like the idea of like put up or shut up, Sure. It's fun. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about, just closing questions, general questions. I actually had these questions written before we did the episode.
Okay, sure.
What are you picturing? Let's say you were doing these films for theatrical release or release onto subscription services, maybe a more relevant description.
Right.
But how far apart would you set the actual films for release in theaters or to Netflix or whatever? What would be your strategy there? Would you do the traditional Disney model, what they did with the sequel trilogy? Would you do more what George did in the 70s and 80s with the original, with 4, 5, and 6? How do you see handling that?
I think more like, I love the idea of more of actually like Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings style, filming it all at once. Doing it all at once, doing all the work at once, and then maybe doing yearly staggered releases.
It's a great idea.
As opposed to Star Wars probably in the 70s and 80s might have even been filmed like that if they knew it was going to succeed.
Yeah.
But so that's why there's like 9 years separating them, 6 years separating the movies. So I feel like that's too much space. Like, I like the idea. Because it proves that you have a coherent vision if you just film it all at once.
Yeah.
That you don't want to dick around and, ruin everything. It's like, well, this is the vision. Like, we believe in the vision and we're going to execute in post on the vision, but we're going to get it all first.
Yes.
And
that's
kind of how about you? How do you envision your films?
I like that approach. I think that approach would require a lot of conviction. I could see you doing that approach. I would be nervous. I almost have the tattoo effect with that approach because I would want to change something somewhere and then you can't. Because they're giving you, let's say the studio is allotting this entire massive budget to do all 3 films at once. And yeah, just knowing myself, it would be hard because I would want to go back and change things or retcon or switch things around. And then you couldn't at that point. But beyond that, I don't know. I like the traditional model seemed kind of cool. And maybe that's just my nostalgia talking. If you go 77, 80, 83, that's kind of neat. 3 years is kind of neat. It would be cool
99,
just to
2002, 2005 as well.
Yeah, right. That's right. Just to pay homage to that model might be kind of fun too. And, again, I thought of a whole new idea for mine. I don't know if you read, I think I tweeted about it yesterday or the day before. For my whole story, where I was like, oh shit.
Oh,
And you
yeah,
know what
I
it
did
was?
say it,
I'm
yeah.
going to tell you what it was. And you tell me what you think of this idea.
Okay.
Really quick. What if, you have this dynamic of this existing, think of, episode 4, 5, and 6. You have this dynamic of this powerful Jedi who fell to the dark side, Anakin, right? He was really strong. And then Luke came along and he was stronger. And then if you go with like the model that I'm doing now, or even with the existing 7, 8, and 9, you have a Rey or a Jin like character who's even more powerful. And then it's sort of, you have the demise of the Empire, you have this new alliance in place or this new organization who are supposed to be good guys, but they realize somehow, probably not in a scientific way, but more of a, I don't know how you would suss this part out, but it comes to pass that they realize, like, as the Skywalker generations evolve, they're going to become more and more powerful until they're completely godlike. Maybe it's already happening with the Jin character, right? Where it's like, no, we have to stop this. And now they become, whoever decides to side with Luke and the Skywalkers against like everybody, which would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Like just a really simple premise, but like we have to stop this before it becomes out of hand.
I love that. I love the idea of Luke becoming. I mean, I've told you, I love Luke becoming the bad guy.
Right.
Now, I'm going to pull back on mine. Clearly, I'm not going to do it because I don't know that that's what Star Wars fans really like.
Yeah.
Or Ron, I know you don't. I know you were nervous about that.
You got to go with your gut on that, I think.
But making Luke, if you don't want to make Luke evil, making him the bad guy, even if he's not, is interesting.
Yes.
And
this would be a good way to do that. Because
right,
you could be sympathetic to why he's fighting who he's fighting. They want to destroy his lineage. That's a kind of an interesting way to turn Luke into Luke. But I don't know. But I can't, I was like, can I tie that in now? And then it was like, you're forcing it. You cannot force that square peg into the round hole, dude. Don't do
definitely
it.
not.
Don't
not at this
do
point. But I do love that idea. I mean, I love that idea of Luke being kind of like, everyone's kind of like, this guy's too powerful.
Getting too much. It's getting to be too much. And then he's got to protect his, which I guess it wouldn't be his. You could make it his kids, but in this case, it would be Han. In my case, it would be Han and Leia's kid, and he has to protect his family and his lineage. And how sympathetic can you be to that? Is the alliance right? Is it getting out of hand? Like, it would paint a lot of interesting questions that aren't very Star Wars-esque traditionally, but could be fun. Listen, I really want Jon Favreau and the tastemakers at Disney / Star Wars, Lucasfilm to watch these because I think we could get hired. I'm not tooting my own horn, but toot.
Well, I've said it before, and I'm just going to reiterate it once again. Coming up with a good idea for a Star Wars movie is not hard, and
you're showing.
I don't understand why they've made it so hard. Although I will say that if I were doing these films, I would have other people direct them. That way I could see that. That way they can, take my vision and do something with it. That way you have like another lens through which the story is told. But
that's a great.
It is, and what I love about your story, too, Dagan, is it just raises like the political tensions that happen in the real world when one group takes over for another group. That group sometimes is worse, and we don't know if that would be true with the Republic, but you're seeing that kind of play out in Afghanistan right now, where like the Taliban is like a legitimate political force there. It's not like we look at them as like a terrorist group. We want to wipe the floor with them, but they're legitimate to a lot of people there. And, or if you go to Palestine more controversially with like Hamas and stuff like that, where there's just like Hamas is either the most evil thing in the world or your savior, your Lord and Savior, depending on where you are.
Right.
And so it explores an interesting political. I think what's cool about both of our stories is that I think they explore nuances that aren't quite childlike because these movies are children's movies ultimately.
Yes.
And they deal with good and evil and light and dark and all these things that are in everything. But so we're getting a little deeper into it, but I like these story ideas and I'm excited to see how we are able to wrap them up.
I think it's going to be fun, dude. Now be serious with me. I'm going to ask you one more question before we close out with the dad joke. Okay. If you're ready to wrap out. I had so much fun with this. It's so self-indulgent. I feel almost guilty, but it's like,
they voted for it.
It's a guilty people voted for it. There you go. Let's just leave it at that.
This wasn't our idea. So
it would no. And you know what? The other thing is that's been pleasant for me. It's been work. Doing the podcast is work. We try to make it really good for you guys. I learned that from Colin. I'm very serious about that with this podcast, but It wasn't as much work as I thought it was going to be. You know how writing is. You know that famous Vince Gilligan quote, I like having wrote, I like having wrote something, you know, but like the thing with writing, it is, the more I do it now, the more, since we started the show, I'm just more involved with writing in general. It is hard, man. It can be hard to work up just the stamina to do it, to get through it, and being, you know, getting through the throes of being self-critical and all that. But it's really been a pleasure. But I wanted to ask you, and be honest with me, and I'll be honest too about this. How much of your story now, we got one more to go, do you know for closing it out? Like, how much of it do you have to create now between now and then, or how much of it do you already know, at least the broad strokes?
I think I would know probably some of the broad strokes, but I would say most of it is not known yet.
Yeah.
Because I need to, I want to, so I've written mine in a document in Google Docs that's just in order, actually, with the 7 and then 8. I just want to, like, when I sit down to write episode 9 in a little while, you know, a few weeks or whatever, I'll just read through it. And then almost as if I'm jumping back in to write another chapter, I'll just continue to write. Because that's always been my process. And Micah was saying that, I said it to you yesterday. It's like, I've been taking notes on a notepad all week.
Okay.
And I hadn't codified anything until this morning. Like, and then I just sat down and I wrote it. You know, I'm like, all right, now I'm going to write. Like, I've thought about it. I have these notes, this almost outline in my mind. And I'm like, because what ends up happening, and I learned this at IGN, although I don't know if it's really good advice for most writers, is if I write things early, then I just continue to edit and delete and edit and delete. Yeah. And I'm like, it's not, with respect, this story is not that important. You know, like, it's like, I'm not going to spend that much time on this, because I do think that, and you know this too, as a creative person as well, it's like, there is an opportunity cost. I'm totally gassed after doing something like this.
Yes.
Like, creatively and mentally, you know, like, I know it sounds crazy to people, but I'm like, I don't know. The reason Sacred Symbols video was a little late on Patreon this week was because we got our ads late, our ad reads, and I was going to read them after we did Sacred Symbols. And I'm like, I can't even think right now.
Right. You're drained.
So it is exhausting if you're a creative person. This is what we do. This is our bread and butter.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always think of Gandalf casting a spell, or like, there's that great, wizard character in Dragon's Lance, Raistlin, the young wizard who like has really powerful dark magic, but like the energy that he extols with like the nosebleeds and like just being drained for 2 days after he casts like a fire spell and stuff. I always love the realism of that, but I always think of that when you just really just expend all your energy on a creative endeavor, and it's like, you know, that's kind of what it feels like, you know, like Gandalf, fly you fools.
Yeah, I know. I love that. I love that. Yeah. We need to rest. Now we need to rest.
Yeah, I like your creative process too. I mean, you're more of a writer, I think, of a professional writer than me. I probably a little more loosey-goosey with my technique, but that is true. Like, you're kind of spinning your wheels after a while. I like your approach because, and it's almost like building up that creative energy to just do it, rather than, like you say, do it and then revise it and change it, tweak it. You know, like there's some wisdom in just sort of going at it. You know, building up, maybe taking notes like you said, or just building things up in your head, jotting things down on a Post-it note or something, and then just going at it all at once. I like that. I could take a lesson from that, because again, or else it's just, you know, you could be essentially wasting time, you know, spinning your wheels. And I'm not sure how constructive that is.
Less is more. I mean, there's all sorts of jokes about writers, about how writers don't write and writers hate writing. And, you know, it's like, it's interesting in the sense that, like, I just think and write notes. I have these legal pads all over my house. I mean, they're everywhere. Yeah. You know? And then once I'm like, all right, I'm satisfied. Like, I really thought about this for like a while. I'm like, all right, I'm satisfied. And then I woke up at 9. I walked the dog, and then I sat here for 90 minutes and I wrote it.
That's brilliant.
And it's like, you know, and I didn't revise anything because I kind of just had my notes, and I'm like, all right, I actually wrote down, like, even, I don't know if people can see it, but like you can see like that even this morning I wrote down like the different people and like where they were, so that when I sat down, cool.
I love that, by the way. I love you noting that going through the thing too, because it's a reminder, you know, and it's thoughtful, you know, it's thoughtful. I could definitely take a cue from you with that, you know, and you found that process easy breezy, right? You sat down and wrote, came out, you were happy with what you.
That's how I wrote Twin Breaker. That's how I wrote Hebroxia. You know, the two games. I mean, I wrote Twin Breaker in like a day. It was just that, and that's a shit ton of writing because there's a lot of writing in that game. But it was like I just thought about it, and then I'm like, all right, I don't I would never assume to tell someone else how to write, because everyone has their own procedure, but it's worked very well for me. And just that, I think lessening your labor, your physical labor, and extending your mental labor will make the writing easier. Thinking very carefully and then letting it go, or just pondering on it in the shower or when you're playing a game.
Sure.
It's better. I don't like the people that's like, they're like, right. You know, Stephen King's like one of these guys. It's like, write every day. And it's like, no, I'm not writing every day. You know, I'm not writing even every month at this point. You know,
he's also like ridiculously prolific, like with 4 books a year and stuff like that. That's just, I don't know what that is, if that's greedy, whatever, but I like your technique because it's concentrated. You know, you're building it up and then releasing it. You know what I mean? I try not to say something dirty, but I know you. We almost got there.
Harry, people like the Harry Potter came in 97 or whatever it was. It was like,
come on.
All right.
Come on.
Dave,
all right, my friend.
Do you want to wrap up with a dad joke like we always do?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just to tell you guys, I do know how I'm ending my episode 9. There's some statements I want to say about Star Wars. There's some broad strokes that I want to paint in here, things that I want to say, like whether it's an inevitability or something that I want to say about the way I think Star Wars should go. But I do have to work out the finer points. But I'm kind of happy with the way I'm going to end it. It's hard to end something on a clever note because everything's been done, right? Every story's been told. Every treatment for an ending's been gone through. But I'm pretty psyched. I think this should be pretty interesting. Who knows? Maybe people perceive it as cheesy, but I'm excited to share it with you guys in a few weeks. But yeah, now this dad joke, man, I have to say, this never happened to me before. I searched dad jokes. I went to a page I thought I never went to. I scrolled down and stopped randomly, and the dad joke was right there. I laughed out loud. It's never been this quick for me. This dad joke was meant to be, is what I'm telling you. So I hope you guys like it. Kyle, I can't take my dog to the pond anymore because the ducks keep attacking her. Well, that's what I get for buying a purebred dog.
That's good. I like that one.
That's a good one.
I used to love throwing bread at the ducks.
I loved it too, but apparently it's not good for them. Now, I don't know if this is true. They tell you like it's just not good to feed wild animals because they don't want them to rely on humans feeding them. Like they have to be able to find food for themselves.
Right.
Or there may be some duck experts there that could answer this for us. Or is the physical bread actually bad for the duck? I'm not sure. I never saw a duck explode or anything from eating bread.
I don't know. I mean, they're not out there like cultivating wheat or anything like that, so I don't know. But no, it's very American. Like it's a very American mentality. Be like, they gotta feed themselves. These ducks need to learn how to feed themselves. All right.
Oh, my friend.
That was great. I like that joke a lot.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. That was like I said, I felt like that one was kismet. Good. Karma.
Yeah. Very well. Nice word. All right. Well, we hope everyone out there enjoyed this episode of KnockBack. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, early ad-free access, the ability to submit questions, comments, concerns, often ideas to the show, submit topic ideas, and so on and so forth. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time for more KnockBack. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.